It is Sunday, May 11th, 2025, and you're listening to Ancient Faith Radio. This is Everyday Orthodox. Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elisa Bielatich-Davis, and we get together here on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. You know, I think it's really important that we get to know the members of the body of Christ, and that we do it through conversation. I think is just the most natural and best way. Here in the United States, we're divided up, right? We worship in different jurisdictions, and we're spread out across regions, and sometimes we're on different calendars, so not right now. Sometimes we're worshiping in different languages, right? We don't always know each other. You know, I have found that, standing on the sidelines of a soccer game like 10 years ago, one of my daughters was playing, and I start talking to this lady, and I look at her cross, and I'm like, "Are you Orthodox?" And she was, but I was at the Greek church, and she was at the Antiochian church, and here we were. We had kids who were hanging out together, and we had no idea. So I think it's a really beautiful thing if we can all get to know each other and build some real unity in the church. So welcome to our sort of our virtual coffee hour, in a sense, right? Because if you ever go to coffee hour and you just sit down next to someone and start asking them questions, I guarantee you will learn something you never knew. You will find out that they've done fascinating things. It's pretty cool. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do it again tonight with our new guest this evening, and I think it's going to be great. So tonight we have Mike engineering the program, and also Simon. Simon's on video, Mike's on audio, and they are both in the Chesterton studios in Indiana. And I'm your host, Elisa Bielatich-Davis. We are on ancientfaith.com. We're on the AFR app, on AFM's Facebook Live, and we stream live on YouTube. And so, of course, if you miss a show, you just come back. You'll find us on YouTube. You'll find us on the app, on Ancient Faith. And that way you just never have to miss one. You always get a chance to meet all of these cool Orthodox Christians that we're getting to know. Okay, so tonight's guest, I think you're going to enjoy this program. It's going to be really interesting. His name is Daniel Neumann. And so Daniel actually was at the Ancient Faith Singles Retreat this year, which was a wonderful retreat and a lot of fun. And so as you know, I like to go to conferences and just collect people for the show. So Daniel is recently illumined. He's a convert to Orthodoxy. He actually he's gone through a lot of difficulties in life. He was an alcoholic. He was an occultist. He was in really a very dark place. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and about how he came out of that and the ways in which Orthodoxy, in which Christianity, the Holy Theotokos, were involved in bringing him out of those dark places and into the light. And so, it's a wonderful thing that he's been able to find the church and to sort of have a whole different experience of things now. So Daniel's a writer. He also, he's on YouTube. In fact, not just right now, but in general, he's on YouTube. And so you can see him there on his podcast or his, what's it called, a vlog? Is it a vlog anymore? I don't know. What do we call it when we have a YouTube? Daniel, what is it called?
Oh, yeah. I guess it would be a podcast or
right?
a vlog type thing. I have conversations with people, and I just kind of do a lot of reading of theologians and prayer.
Nice.
I like to pray a lot. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Well, then, so that's what you can expect if you find him on YouTube. All right, Daniel, welcome to the program.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm excited to have you. It's really nice to get to know you and to get to hear your story a little bit more in detail. So tell me, where does your story start? I always like to begin at the beginning, like where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Okay. So I was born in Harrisburg, and I was raised a Methodist. And I was baptized that way when I was about 6 months old. Okay. And growing up, I had a lot of spiritual experiences. I was very kind of sensitive to the spiritual world. And that actually kind of scared me a little bit. So I ended up deciding when I was around 14, 15 years old that I wanted to be an atheist. I didn't want anything to do with God because I thought it was making me crazy. So I kind of tried to convince myself that God didn't exist. And then when I guess it was about halfway through when I was 15 years old. I got a dream, and I wrote it down in 3 months, and I wrote a novel. And that didn't come from me, because I didn't really read novels, and I didn't really write, and I wasn't really seen as a good student either. So like, I had this new gift all of a sudden, and I couldn't deny that God existed. And I just, because of tapping into creativity, I kind of could feel God all around me. And so I decided to get back into my religion, which is Christianity. But I had people, like teachers, that were interested in me at that point, because I published a novel. And they were telling me, how do you know it's the Christian faith that is the one with God? And my English teacher gave me a book, and I refused to read anything that wasn't Christian. So he kind of tricked me a little bit by giving me a Thich Nhat Hanh book that said Buddhism and Christianity. And that was like the sort of like gateway drug to wanting to know about every religion. And unfortunately for me, Methodism, like that denomination, just didn't have a lot to sink your teeth into. I had no idea the treasury of the Christian faith and how deep it goes. I had a very superficial experience with the church, and I felt like a lot of the people in the church, weren't very fervent. And so like I wanted to know more and more about these other religions. And when I was in college, that's what I decided to do, is take a lot of courses in different religions and philosophies. And I ended up dating a woman that was a witch, and that kind of put me onto a dark path, where like I found this world that like, could use some of these gifts like creativity, and my intellectual mind. And it didn't help me at all. It filled me with pride and death. And for about 10 years, I was an occultist.
Wow. Well, here, let's slow down a little bit. Let's talk about,
sure. I'm doing
that
a lot
experience.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as a young man, right, you start out first reading about Buddhism, sort of accidentally, meaning to read about Christianity as much as it, right? But you mentioned, that your experience in Christianity had been sort of shallow. And so, like, I guess I want to ask, did other faiths seem like so much more spiritual and interesting and fascinating? Because I feel like for a lot of young people, that's one of the things, is that we have such a watered down form of Christianity, especially, they in a lot of churches in the United States, they might not even be in the regular sermon, right? Like they might be in some youth group thing that's just sort of, cheerful about Jesus, and they yearn for something more complicated and deeper and more spiritual. And so then they find it in other places. Like, do you feel like that was part of the problem?
Absolutely. I was involved in my church when I was a Methodist, and I watched the progression where it started out as being in a what they called the sanctuary area, until eventually they brought the services to the basement, and they called it Prism. And in that area, they decided the new thing to do is to sing rock music together. Like, our God is an awesome God. I was the guy who put out the projector for the lyrics, and I was like the computer guy. And I ended up selling my first 2 books at Creation Northeast, the largest Christian music festival in the world. And what I saw there was like a very sort of shallow Christianity. And I was just like, I wasn't, there was, like you said, watered down and not a whole lot to sink your teeth into. And it felt very surface level. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think that means that all Christians, who are not Orthodox are just shallow, right? But it does mean that there's a way that, like, some of the things that in the West we've walked away from that are in the faith, they're really beautiful, and they call to us, and we've kind of just wandered off from that. And so, especially for those who really yearn for it, it can get very frustrating, and not to say that you couldn't just be kind of a cheerful, shallow, surface level Orthodox Christian, right? But if you're someone who wants to dig in, there's no end, right? Like, you just keep going and going.
Not enough time in your life to read all of it. Yeah.
It's cool. It keeps you from pride, right? Because there's just so much more always. But well, that's interesting. Okay, so as you're looking at all these different faiths, were you finding God in them? Like, were you trying to, or were you just learning about them? Like, were you trying to practice different things?
I was trying to figure out who God was, but on my own. I was like, there's got to be some truth to God, and I wanted to find out what everyone thought about God, and then sort of that's when especially of dating that witch, really brought me to that point of wanting to just kind of do it on my own, like the ultimate pride of just like, yeah, I can figure this out. Like
Right.
people have been
I'm spiritual. I've always been spiritual. I can do that.
Yeah, how hard can it be to figure out who God is? Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it is such it's sort of like the problem that Christians in our culture, I think, have is that it's actually your job to figure out who God is in some senses, right? Like you're responsible for determining which theology is correct. And there are a lot of competing options, and it's your job to know which one's the right one. And that's maybe a crazy thing to just take young people and say, well, you got to figure it out. Which one's right? Are you predestined or not? What is God? But you are even bigger than that, right? Like you've blown it completely wide open to all faiths. At what point did you meet the woman who was a witch?
That was when I was in college. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean that was a bad experience, I would say. And at the end of it, I found myself wanting to purify myself because I made a very bad mistake. I agreed to be partially demonically possessed because that's what she said you do. And she was like, if you want to learn how I'm doing the things I'm doing, this is what you got to try. And I was dumb and curious enough to try that. So instead of going to like a priest or going to the church, I wanted to figure out how to do it on my own. And there was people out there who said they could teach how to do that. So I was like searching for, who actually knew how to do these things.
Like purification rituals of some kind? Like were you looking specifically for a Christian ritual, or was it just anything purifying?
So they claim to be Christian. They're the Rosicrucians. So like they're basically Gnostics. They don't actually, they're not true Christians, but they say that they are, but they're not. They're more like, exactly what Satan would want them to be. I mean, it's not like they worship Satan, because I don't think he even wants to be worshipped, but he makes a fool out of us.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your experience like with witchcraft, because I think, for some people that's so foreign and they don't think they've ever met anyone who's been involved, although you think you haven't met anyone, but probably you have, frankly. But, I have a few friends in my parish who are, beautiful, wonderful Orthodox Christians, very involved in the parish. But historically, like they had years where they were witches or involved in some way with Wicca or something like that. How does it happen? Is it like she's just telling you like, oh yeah, give yourself over to Satan, it'll be great? Like, or is she not calling it that? Or is, what's going on?
She wouldn't.
What does it all seem like?
So like from her perspective, she was a champion of the gods kind of deal, but it became very clear who these gods were, that they were definitely demons and they weren't gods. I mean, but yeah. What was your other question? I'm sorry.
I think just sort of like, what are the trappings of it? Right? Like, how do they talk about it? Because having been inside it, you've walked away clearly, like, what this was. But that's not that's not necessarily what they're thinking it is.
Yeah, no, and no one wants to walk into a trap. It's the claims of freedom and agency. Yeah. Like you could have power, and you could be free of this cycle, and it's very Gnostic. It's like a very dualistic, like you're stuck in a meat suit and you need to get out of it. Like your spirit is good, but your body isn't. Like this material world's evil. It's made by the they have like terms like the demiurge and things like that. Yeah.
Oh wow, it is very Gnostic. That's interesting. I didn't realize sort of the anti-material, I guess, angle of it. That's interesting. Okay. So as you're going through this, Yeah, I know at some point you developed, a problem with alcohol and like was that sort of going along the whole time though? Was that something maybe increasingly happening, or does that really happen at a
So
specific moment?
I first started drinking when I was like in high school, but it really got bad in college. And everybody was drinking in college. And then when I got out of college, I had a pretty stressful job, but I also became an occultist. I don't know exactly what all factors went into it. I think there's probably a combination of things that happened there. But I was certainly yearning for something. I didn't know what, and it didn't matter how much I would get drunk. I'd always want more. Um, I just keep drinking and drinking and black out. And I became 300 pounds. I was very overweight too. And I knew that it was going to kill me eventually. And I kept trying to quit on
Profound, isn't it? That is really a profound thought. As one thing that we didn't like visit, and I actually want to go back to this too as we're talking here. So you were talking about when you were a little kid, you kind of had this awareness of spirituality in some way. Tell me a little bit about that. I've known some little kids like that. And, it's an interesting thing, right? It's almost like an inborn, like kind of sixth sense, sort of just an awareness maybe. What was it for you? Like, how did it express itself?
well, there was some things that would happen that were kind of like unexplainable, like with just like sometimes it'd be like objects in the room would sometimes move when I would get like very upset. And I talked to my mom about it, and who's reposed of blessed memory, but she told me to give it to God. And I wasn't really sure exactly what that meant at that age. But what really became difficult was that I saw a lot of demons, and I kept seeing these things, and I was scared. I was scared of what I was seeing, and like going to the Methodist church about it, they're like, "Well, you need to stop watching Pokemon." That's the issue. It's like
Right.
you're watching this Pokemon show, and it's like, yeah, maybe I don't know,
I mean,
but
weirdly enough, though, all these other kids are watching Pokemon too, and they have not noticed any demons at all. So it seems like maybe there's something else. What do you think it was? Why do you think? Like, I mean, it's because I've known kids who were like, you drive past a cemetery and they feel like they've spoken to a ghost or something like that. But, demons is a really, it's just, it's an extremely negative experience to be having again and again as a kid. Why do you think
yeah,
that
and
was
I
going
kind of
on?
wanted to prove it. I remember at one point I wanted to prove it by I saw it on top of a grandfather's clock, or I guess that's what they're called, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we called it, the grandfather's clock. But it was
Yeah.
it was made, I guess, maybe by my grandfather. Maybe that's why we
Oh,
called it that.
so it's
But it's one of
really
those
your
ticking
grandfather's clock.
clocks.
But no, it's a grandfather clock. That's
Okay,
what they
okay,
are.
good. All right. I
Yeah,
was
they're
making sure I
always
wasn't
made
saying
by
the wrong word.
grandfathers. Like people without children and grandchildren are not allowed to build those, I guess, because they are always called that. But
But I tried to climb it. I tried to climb it to get to this thing on top
oh
so that I
no,
could, prove it because I was just a kid. And what ended up happening is, it fell on me, and there was glass everywhere. My mom thought I was squished. She was so terrified, and there was not a scratch on me. Like nothing hurt me at all, and she thought that was a miracle. Um, it really took a long time until I saw anything that was actually good. That took until my sister's car accident, where I saw, I think it was an angel or maybe a saint. It looked like a relative of mine, but he told me that everything was going to be okay, but there was going to be a tragedy in the family. And that happened right before my sister got into a terrible car accident where she, you know, very, very nearly missed dying. She was, you know, so much of her face was cut away from the glass, and it was a really bad accident. And that was like a day that I couldn't go to school because I was just so nauseous. So like I kept having these experiences. I knew like there was something to this. I just didn't know who God was. I just knew the supernatural world existed, and I wanted to know like how could I be in control of this somehow. So it wasn't just affecting me all the time. That I could be kind of steering the wheel a little bit. And I think that's really chiefly why I got into it. Besides some catalysts.
yeah. So I mean, but you did have this really positive, like that's really an interesting experience to have this kind of warning, like something terrible. It's going to be terrible, but it's going to be okay. You know, thank God for that. I mean, who knows with all of your experiences that you'd already had, how much you would have despaired otherwise. But, do you think it was a miracle when you were saved when the clock fell?
I was so young that I don't know.
Yeah.
I know there's been so many other miracles in my life that I can accredit. You know, that was when I was so young. I remember it falling on me, and I remember, you know, like my mom being very afraid and her being very surprised that none of the glass cut me or anything. You know.
There you go. Well, I mean, yeah, I think sometimes too, like kids are like, oh no, it just worked out. But parents are a little more cognizant of what could have happened, right? But okay, so the other thing I want to ask you before we move on past college is you wrote a book. You wrote a novel when you were young, when you were 15, right? What was it about? You said it was about a dream that you had, or was it given to you in a dream?
Pretty much, yeah. So I was given a dream, and I kind of just was able. It just flowed out of me. I would come home from school, and that was like the first thing I would do is I would just start typing away, and I didn't have that ability before. What it was about, it's called OMA One Man Army, OMA One Man Army. It was about it's a sci-fi story about these kids. And it's really a lot like Halo in a lot of ways. You know, like looking back on it, I was very inspired by that, I think. But they have like these armored suits, and they're in this war in the future. But the thing that's like, you know, kind of was given to me in the dream is that a tank fires a bullet at the main character, and there's a Bible in his suit that he was given. And that stops the bullet going through. I mean, I know it's kind of cheesy, but that is like what it was all about. And it was like about faith kind of like involved in this future world, you know, where like most people have kind of given up on it, but there's some people who still do believe in it. They still believe in the Christian God.
That's neat. That's right. That's cool. But I mean, especially at that age, to be able to write something beginning to end, it's just, you know, as you know, you got to keep going and keep going and keep going. It's hard to have like the endurance to get to the end.
Oh yeah, anybody can come up with a book idea. It actually takes, the real work is writing it down, right? Like as writers, are you a writer as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So you know exactly. Yeah. That's where the work comes in, is actually writing it down, not having the idea. You know.
Yeah. Well, and like writing it down slowly, like bit by bit by bit. And so, because people want to just be like, okay, this and this and this. And it's like, okay, well, that's 4 sentences. That is not 4 chapters. So you got to start over. But no, that's cool. Okay. So at that point, did you feel like maybe I should be a writer? Or were you just really convinced, like, this didn't come from me? There may not ever be another book. Like,
I was positive at that point. This was a gift given to me by God, and I would be writing for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to stop ever writing.
So when you went to college, what did you study?
First, it was journalism, and then I switched my major to professional writing.
Ah, nice. Is that like technical writing? What's professional writing?
It's like a sort of umbrella type of degree. Like it can be applied to a lot of different things. I mean, I never really gotten I never been employed by a company specifically for being a writer. I've always used the skills in my employment, and I've been a freelancer. But like, you know, it's hard to get a job just like as a writer, you know, right. But you know, it works for other things, like almost any, like a lot of stuff like teaching and stuff like that. It's really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, and really anything, right? Because there's all kinds of, you might be writing press releases, or you could be writing instructions, you could be writing internal documents or customer-facing documents, but you kind of have to be also knowledgeable in the subject you're writing about. So it's like the writing is there, but there's always some other thing that's there as well. But okay, well, cool. So as you came out of college, did you get a job right away? What'd you do as you finished?
First thing I did was I freelanced, and I did that for about a year to 2 years because I thought I was going to get a job right out of college, but that wasn't happening. That was during the economic recession. So like that was just bad timing to be a graduate. So eventually a friend of mine told me about his job, and he's just like, you're saying that you might want to have a stable job. Like, do you want to try this out? And I was like, well, what is it? And he told me it was human services. It was working with people with intellectual developmental disabilities and autism spectrum disorder. I studied for that, but I'll try it. Why not? And I did. And I did that for about almost about a decade, so all these things kind of line up a little bit. But yeah, it was really fulfilling work, but it was challenging at times. It can definitely have an emotional toll, because over the course of that many years working with folks, you will see things, like things like abuse. And, you go to the correct people like CPS and they don't do anything about it. And you end up seeing bad things happening. Like the staff that was so there for that individual, they now leave. The parents not in trouble for doing what they did. And now the next company comes in and they'll probably know better than to say anything.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see where that becomes a stress that leads you to be drinking after work to kind of relieve that frustration, to escape it a little bit. And then that builds and becomes something else entirely. It becomes an animal with its own life, right? But
addictions. What happens with alcoholism, is eventually you have to drink or else you hurt. And you get to this really bad point where like you'll die if you don't drink. And that's what happened to me. That's, a good segue into like what ended up happening with how I came to orthodoxy is if you quit too quickly, you'll die.
Actually, pause, because we have to take a break, and I do not want to stop you once you start this story. So let's hold off because that's a good introduction. That's a good teaser right there. So you're listening to Everyday Orthodox. We'll be right back with Daniel Neumann.
Each year after Pascha, the Orthodox Church celebrates the holy myrrh-bearers, who cared for Jesus' body after he was crucified. But myrrh-bearing has a broader definition. It can serve as a metaphor for the practical, incarnate love to which Christ calls his followers. In The Art of Myrrh-Bearing, author Elisa Bielatich Davis explores the lives of grace-filled, myrrh-bearing saints in Scripture and throughout the life of the Church, offering questions for reflection in each chapter. By following the lead of compassionate saints, such as Joseph of Arimathea and Olga of Alaska, we can learn to embrace a simple and profound way of life in ever-deepening communion with Christ and with others. You can find this book at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elisa Bielatich Davis, and we're here tonight with Daniel Neumann. Welcome back. Okay, so we were talking about how, and it really is true, right? I mean, with alcoholism, one can get to a point where it's literally like possibly fatal, where it's actually a life and death problem. You were so young to have already reached that point. Is that because of the intensity of drinking?
It's probably a combination of two things. So one, I drank like a fifth a day, sometimes more, so I definitely drink a lot. But I also found out because of my dad that I have a genetic thing that my liver is predisposed to just like breaking. He never was a drinker and his liver is failing and he needs a liver transplant.
Lord have mercy.
So yeah, I think I already had the genes that my liver was not meant for this kind of thing, which is odd because I did my 23andMe and I got the genes for alcoholism, but I just don't have the good genes for the liver,
Doesn't seem fair, does it?
No,
funny
maybe it's for the
works.
best. I don't know. It all seems to work out.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it's better because it brought you to the brink faster, right? Because, had you had a normal liver, you might have made it till you were 65 before you started seeing the signs of liver damage, but you certainly would have been damaging yourself the whole time. But so were you like hospitalized? What ended up happening with the alcoholism? Well, I guess actually Yeah, were you hospitalized from the liver problems, or did you try to stop drinking? What happened?
So, my friend told me about the Inexhaustible Cup icon. He's an Orthodox, and I got that from Amazon. I have it, in my room. I'm like looking at it right now. But I also
you have to tell everybody what that is, because it is
my pin here.
the most. Oh, see, there you go. It's a beautiful icon.
Do you want me to grab the one that actually saved my life?
Yeah, do it.
Okay.
Do it. Okay. While Daniel's grabbing the icon, it's a beautiful icon of the Theotokos, and she's holding the Inexhaustible Cup. And this is an icon where people often, there it is. If you're on YouTube, you can see it right now. If not, you're going to have to Google it later. But it's called the Inexhaustible Cup. And really, like, if you know someone who's an alcoholic, or if you struggle with alcohol, very often it's this icon before which we'll say prayers. And I actually have personal experience. I knew someone who was an alcoholic, and her daughter and I were like, okay, we're going to get Inexhaustible Cup icons, and we're just going to pray for her every day. And we did. And, she found the strength to stop drinking. And, still a whole bunch of other problems, but that problem was solved. And, thank God. But it's interesting, right? Like, certain icons can give us strength. And that idea of that cup, right? Like the living water coming in to replace, maybe that's what we're looking for, I guess, when we're drinking so much, is we're looking for the life-giving water, right? Maybe that's, so your friend tells you about this.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. What were you just going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, it's interesting. Aqua vitae is the Latin for liquor, and that means water of life. But really, Christ is the water of life. He is the living water. So, it's just an interesting little thing. But
it is. It's funny.
Yeah.
Well,
so
awful
he told me
and funny
about
at
this.
the same time.
Yeah, right. It's one of those. So he tells me about the icon, and so I get it. But first thing I need to learn how to do is, like, how am I supposed to pray? Because I didn't really know how to anymore at that point. I was so used to being an occultist, and everything with occultism is intellectual. So I had to learn how to pray with my heart. And I was afraid to ask Jesus anything directly because I was telling lies about him as an occultist. I was kind of a teacher where I was saying, I basically, one of the lies, one of the horrible lies that the Rosicrucians say is that Jesus was a magician. And I was afraid. I was afraid to ask him for anything. So I asked his mother to pray to him for me. And I learned how to pray that with the heart. And I did the Trisagion in front of that icon every day for a month. And every time I would drink, I would do it in front of her, begging her that this would be the last drink and that I wouldn't die an alcoholic. And, typically with tears. So when eventually November 20th comes around, November 21st is when I went into the hospital. I am streaming at the time because I used to stream. It was a show where I used to drink and I talked to people, and I was, just an entertainer. And I was doing one of these streams, and I could tell that, like, something is wrong right now. And I even said it on my stream, which is, like, no longer available, but I still own it. I can still show it to people if they needed to. But it's, I was like, I'm dying, I'm going to die. But I hope you all have a good Saturday. And, I kind of like signed off at that point. And then for about 24 hours, I was alone in my room because I kind of like fell into, like, I guess kind of like not like a coma, but I don't know, like, basically, I didn't realize it, but I was bleeding out of my variceal veins and my throat and my stomach. So I was consuming my own blood, and I was drowning in it. And that's what was wrong.
And this is from the liver damage. It caused that.
Yeah. And also my blood pressure skyrocketed because I was drinking very little, and I was probably drinking too little too fast. I didn't detox correctly. And eventually my dad found a key that I told him about to my room, and he called the 911 and the paramedics came. So they came and they thought that I was dead. And, I came to, which is great. But from my perspective, I went through something very different. I believe what I remember anyway is that I had a chance to submit to Christ. But there were other voices around me that told me that it would be a trap, that if I were to go to heaven, that is just what they call an egregor, and it's just like a psychic prison, and your soul will be trapped there forever. And if God really loved me, I could always change my mind later anyway. And what I should do is explore the cosmos, like an ascended master. This is what they call themselves. Like, that's their version of saints, is ascended masters. They're like, oh, you can explore the cosmos. And I hesitated. I didn't submit, and I was pushed out of God's countenance. And I went to an extremely dark place. And it wasn't just dark, like, because there's no light, but because there was no reason there. It was like a place of like no logic and a lot of just misery and pain and loneliness. It's really hard to describe. It's kind of like one of these like ineffable things that, like, as a writer, it's kind of a challenge, but I also rely on the Holy Spirit to help me with these thoughts. But the most important thing is what happened at the very end. And I remember I was like, I thought I was having a conversation with somebody, and the Theotokos appeared. She came as this bright, blinding light, and who I thought I was talking to, now that I could see him in the light, he looked like a demon. I mean, he had like corrupt flesh, just like rotting flesh coming off him, and the light itself seemed to have like this pressure on him that was like pushing him away like a wind, even though it was just light. But it was the most brilliant light. It filled up the whole place. And I didn't really have a body there, but it seemed like I kind of did at some points. So like, I don't know how to explain it, but like I kind of prostrated to her, and she said, "Worship my son and go to the church." And then she lifted me out of there. So she gave me these two directions. And that's why I decided to become an Orthodox.
Fair. I think that was wow. That's a profound experience. And it's and meanwhile your body's just kind of laying there on the floor and terrifying everybody and making them think that you've passed and you're having this experience. But I love how you describe the light. The idea that that the light almost has like substance to it, and it can push away these evil creatures. That's really beautiful and makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to me how easy it was, in a sense, for you to accept this icon and be, talking to the Theotokos and asking her to help you stop drinking for so long before you had that experience. You were raised Methodist. Like, I mean, I don't know, almost every convert who comes in, unless they've come in from from Catholicism, it's really hard to wrap our heads around talking to Mary, right? Like, you kind of get raised with this idea that you're not supposed to do that. It's a distraction. It's a trap. But what do you think it was that made it so easy for you? Was it that you were at rock bottom and it was just like, here's a thing to hold on to? Or do you think it is also because you had taken so many travels away from Christianity that whatever prejudices you started out with were just wiped out at that point?
I think there's probably a little bit of both, but certainly the latter more so. Like, I think because I walked away from Christianity, it was really easy for me to kind of like give it a fresh look and a reset. Mm-hmm. And especially given the position I was in, it's like, if I'm too afraid to ask Jesus and I'm too afraid to ask God, like, I'm really glad that there's at least some people who believe it's appropriate to ask for intercession, that maybe she could pray for me, and yeah, I think also the desperation too, that I tried everything else and I was willing to try this.
And what a beautiful idea, right? Like that you didn't feel worthy to ask forgiveness, but you could ask her to ask forgiveness because she was worthy and she was, functional in a way that you weren't. That's That's really neat, actually. It's very beautiful. But, okay, so you have this experience, right? And it's like, I mean, when you were saying it's hard to describe, it made me think of the book of Jonah. You know, like Jonah in the belly of the whale. If you read it closely, he's like, and the mountains and the forests. And you're like, wait a minute, why are there mountains and forests in the belly of a whale, right? And it's because, you know, it's Hades or it's something, whatever it is, right? It sort of stands in for Hades in some way. But it's this depth that he goes into and this darkness. And, you know, as you're processing it now since then, is that what it feels like? Does it feel like you went into something like Hades and you know, or that like you backed away from God and allowed yourself to be pulled into this darkness that was sort of chaotic, and then the Theotokos, though, was able to come into it?
Oh, I absolutely believe it was Hades. I mean, you know, hell, Hades, whatever you want to call it. It was the place where like there was no grace, you know. And there was like different scapes that sort of like I recall, like, because there was a lot there. I don't know how long I was in there. And I don't know if it's a physical place or if it's a place in my own soul, you know, which is also pretty terrifying to think that's how dark my soul was, is that's what it looked like on the inside. But whatever it was, I mean, it was pretty terrible. And there was something that was interesting, is that there was a light, because I said there was no light, but there actually was a light in the distance that like other occupants of this place, it was a very like lonely place most of the time. And most of the time, if there were others, you didn't want to be around them. But like there was almost like a rumors that this light is getting closer, and it's something that they all feared. Like everybody knew it was going to be a bad thing and it was imminent. That light is getting closer, and people would look out like sentries at the furthest edge and like stare at it and measure how close it's getting and how fast.
Did you recognize that as the second coming at the time? Like, were you thinking that that's what that was?
No,
you weren't thinking a lot, right? You were like,
no, I was pretty scared. And that's the other thing. Is like, you know, people like have asked me, and, you know, I haven't shared this with that many people, but some have asked like, were you repenting? And I was like, no, I wasn't repenting. I couldn't think. Like everything was just chaos down there. You know, it was mostly running. And when there was time not to flee, you were searching for things like trinkets of meaning, but there's no meaning there. There's nothing for us. So there's nothing to like take back or anything. But people, you know, I you know, searched, but there was nothing really to get. So it's just like sense. endless searching and fleeing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that sounds like hell for sure. But so the Theotokos came into it, though, and she just entered it, which is beautiful, right? That we talk about how Christ went to Hades and that he's forever going to Hades for us, right? Like that moment is the fullness of time. He's always going to Hades. He's always coming down for us. But it's not just him. It's his mother, too, that she would come down, that she would come in for you. Is very beautiful, because you had invited her in a way that maybe you hadn't invited Christ yet, right? That you were maybe afraid to do. So I'm curious, because I know in my life, there have been times when I've seen miracles, and I've interviewed people who've experienced miraculous healings or different things. And one of the things we often talk about is, you know, what do you do with that? Right? Like, okay, so you stop drinking and I assume, though, that you had some pretty serious health problems to grapple with, right? It wasn't just like, I'll stop.
They told me I was going to die without a liver transplant. I shouldn't even be alive right now. I mean, medically speaking, they said your liver cannot, what did he, I forget the term that he used, and it's not even a big word. It's like physiological. Like it's just like impossible that this liver can heal. And, he's like, you need a transplant or you're going to die in 6 months. And, you know, it's been almost 3 years. In November, it'll be 3 years, you know, and I've gotten so much.
You're still here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm 100 pounds less, you know, the only thing that I drink is blessed wine. You know, I take the Eucharist, but that's not really technically alcohol in my opinion. That's the blood of Christ, but there's also blessed wine. And I've had that, and that does not cause me to have any kind of cravings for alcohol either. So I
Thank
really
God.
do believe that the Theotokos completely healed me. Like
Thank
more
God.
than just like my body, but like my soul and my mind, I think even too.
You know, when we say the prayers for healing, we pray, prayers during illness and things like that. We always ask for healing of soul and body. And it's always soul first, right? Because that's the really important healing. And I think it's rare that anyone gets the healing of body without the healing of soul, if it's truly a miracle, if it's truly from Christ. But
it does seem like one follows the other, doesn't it? It seems like everything starts with like the soul and the spiritual world. Even sin comes from the spiritual world. It comes from above, It's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's very beautiful. But it's so, I think one thing to point out to the audience is with liver transplants, like when my daughter had a liver transplant as an infant, some things like kidneys, if you need a kidney, you can go on dialysis for a while. Liver transplants aren't like that, right? Like if your liver goes bad, you're just out of luck, and your body really doesn't, like it just causes all the other organs to start failing. Like there's not a way to postpone that. Was part of this experience for you also sort of grappling with that fear and that realization, or did you kind of know that you were going to be healed? Like how'd you take that news about your liver?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was something that was a fear that I had, that I wasn't going to make it to actually being illumined. I thought the process would take too long. It was just like, I don't know if I have a whole liturgical year, like, can I take communion now? And it's just like, no, sorry. But if you die, you'll get a funeral. But like, and one thing that helped me was, number one, what you said before is like, that sort of assurance that like, if God got me this far, he has a plan for me. Like that would be cruel, not to let me go. I mean, not like I could
still be going to heaven. Like it's not really cruel, right? It's like,
but
you're really saved.
I feel like I once I learned that there truly was the body and blood of Christ, like that was real. That existed somewhere. I knew I needed to have that, and I did have trust, but it's the kind of trust that shakes. It's the kind of trust that sometimes I would cry. At night, I'd be like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it to, because I was going through medical stuff. Like my blood pressure was so low that I would pass out. It happened to me one time at church, and I had to take pills for it for a while. Now I don't have to take those anymore. But, it wasn't like it was like this, I'm healed. Yeah. It was a process for sure.
Yeah. No, the liver is complex, and the proteins that it creates are very necessary to human life. And when you're depleted, even with my daughter's transplant, she was very, very sick. She was really on the verge of dying. And so when she got her transplant, I mean, it was years before her body was normal. Like there's just all kinds of repair and reworking that has to happen. It's complex for sure. And so it's sort of especially, beautiful. You're especially grateful for recovery from that, because it's not like, I don't know, I imagine that with some of the other organs, like maybe with a kidney or with a lung, like maybe they just start working. I don't know. But boy, the liver, it starts working, but it's got a lot of work to do, right? Like there's a lot to be done. But thank God for that. So how do you deal with the feeling that you've received this great gift? How do you ever do enough with it? Right? Like how do you have days where you forget about it and then you feel like a jerk because you forgot about your great miracle? Right? Like, can you be always conscious of it? Can you ever sort of repay it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there kind of a problem for that? Is it too big a gift?
Well, that's the beauty of icons. They're there to remind us, right? And that's the most important thing in Christianity, is that we had to remind ourselves, because God's not going to give this to us every single moment. It's up to us to keep this fire alive. And I of course tried. I don't think I've messed up, but like every day I say, thank you for giving me a second chance, and I kiss that icon. And as for, can I ever do enough with it? I trust that God has something planned for me, and I been taking a little bit at a time. Like I like to make songs, but basically those are just vehicles for my poetry. Really, I'm more of a writer than a musician, but I really like writing poetry about God that's contemplative, and I also make prayer bracelets with gemstones.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. Yeah, that was something in the hospital. I had one of those Orthodox prayer bracelets, but those knots, I had edema real bad. I was I was like immobile in the hospital for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't really feel between the knots. So I was like, as soon as I get out of here, I had some ideas of like, what am I going to do when I'm finally out of here? I'm like, first of all, I'm going to take care of my body. I'm never going to want to get in this position by my own choices again. And I'm going to make a bracelet with gemstone beads so that I can feel them more.
Yeah. There are sometimes people will make them with really big knots. Have you seen these? They're my favorite.
I've seen a few of those, yeah.
I want really big. I want just because, I don't even have edema. I just feel like I need really big knots, but it's no joke, right? I mean, it's really, there's a lot that goes into that kind of illness and that kind of recovery. And even just enduring through that is itself an accomplishment. But being able to, of course, be sober since then. And, this is a beautiful thing. It's really, congratulations. This is really wonderful.
Well,
so tell me.
I mean, he's the one.
Yep. It's true. But you're right. He saves you for a reason, right? So whatever it is, it's just going to be him working through you, and he'll figure it out. He'll work it out. You don't have to worry about it. I think that's true. But it is interesting to me. So I think if you're dying and you're a catechumen, surely you would have had an emergency baptism if you were dying. Don't you think? Don't you think the priest would have come and like sprinkled some water real quick and given you communion?
Well, I actually was chrismated. I entered in through chrismation because my Methodist baptism was done in the name of the Trinity. So
okay, well there you go. Even easier, right? Like
yeah, just a quick chrismation and yeah.
I bet he would have if it had really come down to it. I bet you would have received communion. Just I mean, we're not here to like lock people out, right? But it's just more that it's to your benefit to spend this time and to go through. And especially for you, you had been through so much. It makes sense to have a year-long catechesis and really absorb it and take it slowly because this is a lot very quickly, right? But so what was that like? So, as you're getting better, you're starting to recover, you come back home, you're making bracelets. What has it been like since then and how did it go and how was the chrismation?
Oh, the chrismation and taking the Eucharist for the first time was amazing. So what was the process like? I would say, I think the most important thing about my catecumenic period was going to every service I could. And I was really blessed by God that I had the ability to do that. I was actually able to like not be working during that time. So I could go to like every service. For a good amount of the time, not maybe the whole year, but like where I just like didn't miss one. And I feel like that was the best catechism of all. But of course, like reading things like Callistos Ware and Castellano and some good books. Oh man, one thing that I love, and this was something that my spiritual father gave me, Father Stephen, when I was really struggling, because when I became a catechumen, I told my spiritual father everything. I gave him a complete confession, and I didn't realize that was for the end of the catechumen period. I thought that like maybe that would get me the Eucharist quicker. And anyway, by doing so, by telling him about all the stuff from the occult world, like there's like a belief from that you're basically cursed. And I felt like the enemy really was attacking me, like really bad. Where like either the liver's going to kill me or Satan's going to. And so he gave me this book, and it's actually the Ancient Faith Prayer book.
Yes.
And I love it because at the very end of it, there's an excerpt from St. Nikolai Vamirovic, Prayers by the Lake. And I got that book, and I absolutely love that. That's been so inspiring to me. It makes me actually, that's why I want to write so much contemplative poetry.
Right.
I want to be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah. No, the Prayers by the Lake is just one of my favorite books because it's so beautiful, right? It's just St. Nikolai's poetry and he's wonderful. And he's just got all these beautiful insights and that's really neat. So during your catechumenate, I guess you were still recovering, so you really couldn't be working. So you were able to be so present. But how long has it been now? Like when were you chrismated?
That would be September last year. So once we hit September, it'll be 1 year. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is just very recent still. This is, you're still fresh. That's great. So how is your parish?
Oh, I love it. It's the perfect parish. It's a singing parish. I love to sing, and we sing there. It's OCA, and
are you still in Harrisburg?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I know a whole bunch of people at your parish. I always say when I retire, Harrisburg is one of my top 3 choices, and I'll be at your church if I do. So there you go.
Oh, that'll be awesome. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool? But you still have to be there for a while because I don't
know if you want to do it on the show, but like, who do you know?
I know some of the chanters or some of the choir singers, actually. So there's a whole group of ladies. No, I know the ladies because they came to the Ancient Faith Women's Retreat several times, actually. So, yeah, that's really cool. That's very, very cool. All right.
Nice.
So I'm excited to make that connection. That's nice. But yeah, what a lovely parish that is, actually. I mean, I think over the years I've probably met maybe 10 people from your parish, and they're welcoming, they're faithful, they're kind. That's perfect. That's wonderful.
I love the fact that we actually are on the OCA website for being a model for migration because we brought in an immigrant family from Eritrea. And there's an article about us in there. And, that's something that's very close to my heart is that we need to treat migrants well. I'm not for the criminal gangs and all that, of course, but it says in the Bible we should treat the stranger well. And I think
absolutely
that's something we need to be reminded of sometimes as Christians here in America.
It's true. It's very true. And I think Christians everywhere always need to be reminded of it, but we do have a pretty high number of people migrating to the U.S., so it's especially relevant to us, I guess. But, well, that's really neat. I'll have to look online and see that. I actually know an Eritrean couple that I'm really trying to get on this show, so maybe afterwards I'll email you and ask for the name of that family, and maybe we can get some of them on the show, too, because I feel like Eritrea is one of those, it's an Orthodox country, and people have never even heard of it. They have no idea what it is. So it's kind of neat to bring that out into the light as well.
And they deal with persecution too. So they're like,
they absolutely
the real deal. That's what brings out, I think, the best in Christianity is persecution. People talk about the issue of suffering all the time. I don't really see it. I sometimes wonder if how could things be so good if there wasn't suffering? Because it turns us into better people.
It really, unfortunately, we do seem to require it, don't we?
Yeah.
We really, when things are good, we just sort of drift off and we play video games or whatever, and we don't worry about anything, right? But it's when the going gets tough that we start asking real questions and looking for meaning and looking for God. And so, thank God for suffering. Glory to God for all things. It seems that we require it sometimes, unfortunately. But gosh, it's been really nice getting to know you, Daniel. I really appreciate you coming on and telling us your story. What is the name of your YouTube channel if people want to follow up and hear some of your conversations and poetry?
It's called Burning Bushes Channel.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah. Burning Bushes.
The idea of it is that we should all be like the Theotokos. We all should have God inside of us. And I think of her like the proto-Christian, like she was the first Christian. She was the first one to have Christ inside of her.
That's right. She was the first one to know, right? Like he was, Here he comes. She was the first to know. It's so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate this. This has been absolutely delightful.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience for joining us. And come back next week and we'll meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. Looking forward to it. Good night.